Okay, so what if I told you that an ancient text wasn't really about religion at all, but was actually a technical manual, a guide for a massive cognitive upgrade? Today, we're going to dive into a framework for leveling up your own consciousness, treating the mind not as some mystical thing to be saved, but as an operating system that you can learn to master.
And this right here, this one sentence is the key to everything else we're about to talk about. You've got to forget that old idea of enlightenment as just escaping reality or floating away on some cloud. No. This material presents it as the ultimate creative power. It's like you're gaining system administrator rights to actively build and improve the world all around you.
So how does a journey like this even begin? Well, the very first step, level 1, is all about a fundamental shift in your perspective. It's about going from being a character who's just caught up in the game to becoming someone who can actually see the code running behind the scenes.
You know, most of us, we operate as reality players. We're totally bound by the rules, we just react to whatever happens, and we see the world as this collection of solid, separate things. The first real upgrade is moving from that to becoming a system observer. This is where you start to see the underlying patterns, the principles that are actually governing reality itself. You're no longer just playing the game, you're starting to understand how it's built.
Now, to make that mental shift, you've basically got to install a few software patches in your mind. 3 core insights. First, you start to see that beings, including yourself, aren't these fixed, solid things, but more like temporary processes, kind of like a wave in the ocean. Second, you get that sounds, and really all information, are like echoes. They aren't the thing itself, just a signal. And third, you see that the physical world, all the forms you see, is like a projection, a shadow play, not the ultimate source. When you really internalize these, that's what lets you detach and truly observe the system.
Okay, so once you've made that switch to an observer, the next level up is, well, it's even more radical. This is about moving from passively seeing the code to actively learning how to interact with it. We're going from observing to hacking.
The key that unlocks this next level is a powerful ability the source calls prajna paramita. And look, this isn't just wisdom in some vague, abstract sense. It's framed as a totally functional skill. The ability to see that reality works kind of like a hologram, where every single point contains all the information of the whole system. It's a perception that turns the world from a static stage into a dynamic, fully interactive database that you can actually query.
So, if reality is this giant holographic database, how do you actually talk to it? How do you interface with it? Well, you need the API keys. And this is the next crucial concept, a system for getting structured access to the fundamental laws of the universe. So what kind of power are we talking about with these API keys? The source calls this the Dharani system, and it's best to think of these as permission levels. With them, you get access to the world engine to literally shape environments. You get time access, that's read and write permissions for the past, present, and future. A psychology parser lets you instantly understand the mind of any being. You can even tap into the core algorithm library that governs things like karma. It is, for all intents and purposes, a complete set of admin tools for reality.
Now, obviously, if you're going to have that kind of root access, you're going to need some serious processing power, right? And that brings us to level 3, a massive upgrade to your mind's bandwidth and your ability to generate resources out of thin air.
This is like upgrading from single-thread consciousness, where we can only really focus on one thing at a time, to an enlightened OS that's capable of huge parallel processing. The source describes this as being able to simultaneously load and perceive countless worlds at once, not because the worlds just magically appear, but because your mental bandwidth has been expanded infinitely.
And here's the really amazing part. With that infinite processing power comes an infinite supply. This is a huge shift from the zero-sum game we're used to, where we think resources are finite and we have to compete for them. In this Dharma realm, resources aren't external things you fight over. They are generated directly by the limitless capacity of the mind itself.
And this quote just nails it. Scarcity is really just a function of a limited mindset. Once your own mind becomes the source, the whole concept of scarcity just becomes obsolete. The only bottleneck is your own internal state. So, all of this brings us to the biggest question of all. Why? Why would you want to acquire all this power? What's the end game of becoming a system administrator for reality? Well, the purpose isn't personal gain at all. It's profoundly practical and compassionate. The source actually lays out a very clear 2-step model for social engineering, but in the best possible sense of the word. And the sequence here is absolutely critical.
First, you use these new abilities to provide for people's material needs. You solve the problem of survival. Then, and only then, once people feel safe and secure, do you guide them towards spiritual awakening. I mean, you can't teach philosophy to someone who's starving, right?
So here it is. This is the complete system architecture, the whole shebang, putting all those pieces together. It all starts with prajna, seeing reality for what it is. That lets you use dharani to control the rules. Samadhi gives you the deep mental stability you need to run this whole system without crashing it. Your vows are your why. They set the driving purpose. Merit is the engine that generates the resources. And it all culminates in the final goal, altruism, applying this entire incredible system for the benefit of everyone.
And that ultimately leaves us with a question for you. This whole framework, it's not just some ancient philosophy, it's a prompt. It asks us to think about how our own perception, our own capacity, are the real building blocks of our world. So if you had the admin rights, what would your new world look like? What's the first thing you would build?